Hi there, I'm Catherine. Welcome to my channel. I just thought I would introduce myself and give you a little bit of background. There are various videos on my channel now about introductions to tarot, to learning to read the cards, interpretation. There should also be a few on the individual cards themselves and their meanings, and a few bits and pieces on different decks and how you can use them. So, my name's Catherine, obviously, and I have been reading tarot cards since I was 12, which, should we say, is a very long time ago. My mother was into tarot cards. She was into all sorts of new age stuff, crystals, the works. And she had a tarot deck and some books. She decided to pursue other religious options. She became a born-again Christian and decided that all the new age stuff had to go. I was fascinated with cards though, so I took them and one of the books and started learning how to read tarot cards. Eventually she cycled back round to divination and all things strange, and she took those back. So at that point I had a job and I went out and I bought my own tarot deck. Been buying them ever since. It just becomes an addiction. Anybody who starts getting into tarot cards will know, or once you start buying them, they just stack up. We've got mountains of them all over the place here. So from there, I started taking an interest in divination as a wider topic. I've studied things like runes, palmistry. I have a crystal ball. I feel a little bit silly really having a crystal ball. It seems like such a strange thing to own personally. But there's bone casting, scapulomancy, tea leaves. I just loved all of it. But like they say, you never lose it for your first love. Always come back to tarot, and it's now how I make a living. One of the things I find really interesting is buying tarot books or going online and watching tarot videos and seeing the differences in how people interpret the cards, how people lay out a spread, and the ones that they make up for themselves, because yes, you can do that. You can make up your own spread. How they lay that out and then mix it in with something a little more traditional, or take something very traditional like a Celtic cross spread and then add in extra little bits that give it their own personal flavor. I love that. I love to see how different people interpret things differently. And that's a key part of learning how to read tarot, actually, is understanding how other people do it and seeing whether it resonates or not. Is that something that you could look at and say, oh, remember that. I'll see if it fits in with my readings. Or you look at it and go, well, that's interesting, but I don't think I'm ever going to apply that meaning. Wouldn't fit for me. But I have found, as I've gone on to videos, read books, that there seems to be this idea that you have to be special to read tarot cards. Yikes. There's unfortunately a lot of ego that comes into this industry, and it can be off-putting for people. This idea that if we read tarot cards, we're special, we're gifted, we're more psychically in tune, we can just pick up any deck and read. And the reality is, anybody can learn to read. There are ways to make it easier. There are certain decks that make it easier. There are certain ways of learning keywords. There are certain spreads that are easier to start you off with, but anybody can learn, which is why I decided to put this little channel together and give hints, tips, introduction to, so that people can see how it actually works and how you could take a deck, any deck, provided it's a 78 card deck, and learn how to do readings. In the videos, we will be covering some of the card meanings in details, like literally all 78 of the cards, one at a time. Some of the videos will be little and straight to the point. Other videos will be bigger. They will be in depth. They will go into detail about certain cards in certain positions, because certain spreads are very clear about this position represents this position represents that. And some cards are easy to interpret in one position, but very difficult to interpret in another. Say, for example, the card, the devil, or death. They tend to be awkward cards, not in the fact that they've got horrific meanings. They are two of the most misunderstood and misinterpreted cards. But if you have a spread, and that spread specifically says, well, I'm looking at changing my career, so I want this spread to tell me about what career path I should take. If you put down a card like death or the devil on a space that says, what are my most positive attributes? What do I bring to the table? That card sitting there might be a bit more challenging to interpret. So those in-depth videos go in-depth about how you interpret those, how you find the meanings, how you unwrap, how you dig down to really see from all angles. And it's the same when it comes to timing. In a Celtic cross spread, there is a section for timing. And again, if you end up with something like the devil or death or the lovers, you could look at that and say, well, what does that tell me about timing? And it can be a little bit more confusing, but there are ways and means of digging down and digging out the information that answers that question and makes it fit. So if you're interested, maybe just a passing interest, watch the little videos, see what you think. If you're more curious and you want to really dig down, especially if you want to learn how to read tarot and you're looking at the possibility of turning it into a career, getting the in-depth stuff, even if you don't use it right away, it'll get you thinking. It'll open you up to your own interpretations. If you watch some of the other videos, like the introduction, then you'll see that bringing your own interpretation to it is very, very important. Because although you get these lovely little books when you buy a tarot deck, although nowadays there's so many tarot decks and they've just got a QR code on the side and you're supposed to scan the QR code and download a PDF, I hate it. Give me something tangible, something tactile I can touch. Hate everything being like uber technology these days. So you get one of these and it gives you reams and reams and reams and more reams. And then you buy a book and they're huge. Look at that. Right. Reams and reams and reams. How do you consolidate all of that? Well, that would be really, really challenging, let's be honest. So much. You would need to whittle it down, not just as something you can remember, because this isn't a memory game. You're not showing off to the person at the other side of the table, look at how much I can remember. There's 78 of these, and I can remember the meanings for all 78, and then a whole set of extra meanings for if they're reversed. It's not something you're supposed to be showing off about. You're supposed to feel it on some sort of intuitive level. And the only way to bring that knowledge and knowing together is to start small, start slow, and make sure the meaning fits for you. That you think, yeah, that makes sense. I can see that. Now, it's not always clear right away, which is why I always encourage people to leave my little book. I always encourage people to purchase something like this, which is a nice notebook. You can make it as plain or as fancy as you like. I like the leather bound stuff. And you write in it all your notes. As you can see, I've done some scrolling there. And they're just thoughts. Some of them are sort of, I read this in a tarot book, not sure. Some of them are, I had a thought about a particular card today, make a note. Some of them crop up when you're reading for somebody. I've had it happen where a particular card crops up and the person at the other side of the table happens to mention something like, oh, my daughter's trying to get pregnant, they're doing IVF. And there's a particular card there, and it suddenly resonates with me that I've had 2 other clients where they or someone they know have been going through IVF and that card has shown up. Now, I can assure you that when you bust open one of these little fellas, there's nothing in there about IVF. It's not assigned to any particular card. But it will become a card that to you will signify that. And that's how you and your cards build that relationship where something takes on a very specific meaning that doesn't apply to other tarot card readers. If you say to another tarot card reader, what's your IVF card? If there's a couple and they're looking, they're struggling to conceive, what card is that? They will look at you like you've grown another head. Some of them might say, oh yeah, I have this. Or if I see the Ace of Cups with this other card, it's the combination. Now that happens a lot, combinations. You will get the hang of certain combinations. And that becomes unique to you. But too many people come to tarot expecting that they will memorize this somehow. And then they'll be able to do a spread and it will somehow intuitively flow and be really accurate. And that is a system just designed to make you suffer. It's not going to be a fun time for you. And then you're going to encounter the people that will say, you clearly just don't have a gift. We're very special tarot card readers. We have gifts. Psychic, we're intuitive. I just feel things. I just know things. Nah, I don't buy into that. Anybody can learn. So that's why I put this channel together. I have my own website. People book in on the website and I do readings mostly through Zoom and Microsoft meetings, that kind of software. Occasionally in person if they're in the city that I'm in. Also occasionally do corporate things, charity events, fundraisers, things like that. Those tend to be face-to-face. And that is how I make my living. But constantly coming across this funny way of trying to gatekeep tarot card reading and saying you have to be special. It's not for anybody. It's not for everybody. It's for the chosen few. Just seemed a little yucky. There's no better word for it. It just seemed yucky. So I started with Facebook and Instagram. Just 1 card a week. Just say, pop that, take a photograph of it, stick it on Instagram, stick it on Facebook and say, here's basically what this card represents. This is what it means. This is the traditional meaning. This is what it can also mean. This would be a great card in this circumstance. And then I decided to build on that and think about, well, would little videos detailing that where I could essentially waffle. I'm a great waffler. There's probably some Scandinavian DNA in there. I'm such a great waffler. The dad jokes will be a continuous theme. But I thought, maybe people would like to hear somebody's take on it. They'd like to hear how you become a tarot card reader, how you go from buying one of these and looking at the little book to actually being able to throw your own website together and read professionally and do it to a standard where your clients come back, where after a few months, people email you saying, have you got a wee space for me again? Because that is the mark of good business. It's not just how many new clients you can generate, it's how many of the ones that you read for come back. So here are those videos. You can still check out Facebook and Instagram and see my little card a week. You can also see silly tarot-based memes, the odd inspirational quote, and a few pictures of my cat. Anybody who has pets, we do love to put our pictures up on social media. There's no getting away from that. You can also check out Patreon. There's lots of free content. It's not one of those things where you have to buy in to the memberships. There are buy-in options. They will by and large be for people looking for more structured courses, the big, in-depth, more detailed how-tos, talking about spreads. There will also be bits about putting businesses together, how to read for people online, the do's and don'ts, things like that. There's also sections of videos where we'll review decks. I wasn't sure about that, but people seem to enjoy the notion, and I do have an awful lot of tarot decks. So there's ones like this that come in a nice box, and they have a much nicer manual. You know, it's not huge or thick, but it's got the images, it's got a good discussion about them, what the cards mean, and it has the cards. And then you've got ones like this, and that comes with a really nice guidebook and a lovely box. And I think one of the reasons why it appeals to people to have people review decks, it's my standard go-to for actually reading for clients, Tarot de Marseille. And funnily enough, it has the only little leaflet that has ever been useful to me. Most of them, if you've watched any of my other videos, you've heard me trash these and actually say, just throw them away, which I don't. I have trouble throwing things away, so don't use me as the gold standard, but I throw them into a shoebox. I've had to fish them out for these videos. The one that comes with Tarot de Marseille is quite detailed. And it talks about various suits. It talks about combinations of cards as well. It gives you lots of information. But it talks about combinations and context, and if cards show up in different places, you don't tend to get that on these. So that's one of the few that I've held on to. But getting back to my original point, tarot cards are expensive. They really are. There's no getting around that. Sometimes you can get little knockoff decks from China, let's be honest. Now, I'm not going to throw shade at the knockoff decks because, as I've just said, tarot cards are expensive. The idea of dropping 60 or 70 pounds, I live in the UK, on a deck that you haven't actually had any chance to work with. It's all well and good to go into a shop, take it out of its box, look at it, feel it, look at the pictures. You can't sit down and do readings in the shop. They're going to say, "Excuse me, madam, please leave." Or, "I'm sorry, but this is Wendy's." But you really can't experiment with your connection to a deck until you have it. So these itty bitty little ones that you can get are great for seeing if you actually like the deck. Using it, reading with it. Now both of these decks, I bought the Cheap and Cheerful tiny ones, and I then went on to actually buy the bigger ones. That one, James Reed, is nearly £70. And I just couldn't afford to drop £70 and then not be 100% sure that I was going to love the deck. This one, we will cover in more detail when I actually review the Kim Krans deck. It's the Wild Unknown. Her cards are beautiful, but they have a matte finish. Now, as anybody who's tried to shuffle cards that have a matte finish, it is incredibly frustrating and you're likely to damage the cards. So I decided to buy this moderately cheap knockoff because they're very, very glossy. And the super duper glossiness, you can actually see it if I let my light reflect on it here. They are smaller, which makes shuffling easier. And they fit into a handbag, which is nice. I consider them my travel size. So I don't regret buying the knockoff. However, if you like the deck and you're going to use it, please think about buying the full-sized deck so that the creator and artist actually gets some money from it, because they put an awful lot of time and effort into it. So, having said that, I do buy them sometimes to actually see if I can work with them, see if I like them, and as I say, occasionally they work really well as a travel deck just for throwing in the bag. But that has always been my solution to it, because you don't see a lot of tarot deck reviews. Now, maybe I'm looking in the wrong places, but I'm not seeing a lot of them. So I figured that I would have got an awful lot of tarot decks. Looking at it now, feeling absolutely swamped. And I thought I would take the opportunity to go through those decks, take some photographs. You'll get unsolicited deck pics. I'm here all week. Like I said, the dad jokes are unavoidable. But we will go through them, take photographs, talk about the pros and the cons, and it gives people some insight into the decks. Yes, it also gives me an excuse to buy new ones. But, you know, I've never needed much of an excuse. So there will be videos on that. And again, I will put some of those on Instagram and Facebook, just the stills, so that if you're more of a Instagram, Facebook person, you can still keep up to date. As I say, there'll be some Patreon stuff. I'm going to try to limit the amount of stuff that is behind a paywall. Like I say, I actually make a living reading my tarot cards, but I do actually also want it to pay for itself with regards to, you know, various fees and setups and things. So there will be some content that you'll need to be a paid member for. Most of the stuff, though, is going to be at the basic membership level, where you can just drop in and have a look at the videos. Go into YouTube, have a look at the YouTube stuff if you want to. And hopefully it will give you an opportunity to understand tarot card reading as a profession, as an art, however you describe it. It should give you some insight into various decks. It should give you some insight into how readings work, spreads. And it should also give you some insight into the real nitty-gritty. What decks are good for different things, what each card means, what the suits mean, how to interpret cards on various positions, how to interpret them in combination. So if you're just interested and you like the idea of tarot, you can drop in and out. If you're looking to build something, to learn how to do it, you should find what you need. If you're hoping to learn to do it to a really high standard and potentially do it as a business, the Patreon stuff makes more sense. But again, that's your call. As I've said, lots of free content all over. Something for everybody. Feel free to join the Facebook and Instagram pages and just smile at the little memes and the pictures of my cat and get a basic overview of card meanings. But hopefully you find something that you like and you keep joining us for the videos. Thanks very much.